Welcome back. I'm your host, Mr. B. We have an update from you from a pretty controversial figure nowadays, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is giving an update on this new law that I think has been enacted in over 40 states and also around the world in 40 countries that I think most Americans have no idea about this law being updated, and that they could potentially be at risk for inadvertently saying something or violating this particular law. I don't have a whole lot of insight on it, but I found it to be quite fascinating when Tucker explained it. So that being said, I'm going to share the video and we'll discuss it accordingly once it's shared with everyone.
What is anti-Semitism? And if you've been called it, or if someone's ever implied it, you have a problem with the Jews. You're kind of obsessed with the Jews. Say people who are completely obsessed with the Jews. You probably wonder, like, what are they accusing me of? Well, here it is. This is the IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA. You may hear this. The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Do you know what it is? It's on their website. It's worth looking at. Spent the morning reading it. Fascinating. So here's the actual definition of anti-Semitism. And by the way, this is a now globally recognized definition enshrined in law around the world in more than 40 countries. This is the definition, and I'm quoting. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Huh? So anti-Semitism is a perception. It's a feeling. Okay. I thought you're allowed to have any feeling or perception you wanted. You could look at facts and come to any conclusion you wanted. No. Certain perceptions are inherently immoral. They're, quote, anti-Semitic, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Oh, so you don't have to hate the Jews to be anti-Semitic? No. Well, that answers the question for those of us who don't hate Jews at all. How could you be anti-Semitic if you don't hate Jews? Well, you can be, according to the official definition of it. Continuing the quote, rhetorical meaning talking, words, speech, formerly protected no longer, rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Wait a second. So anti-Semitism is not necessarily hatred of Jews, and it can be expressed toward non-Jews. So you don't have to hate Jews, and you don't have to express or have these perceptions, these feelings toward Jews. You can be non-Jews too. What is this? Well, the people who wrote it at the IHRA probably anticipated this would be confusing to you. So they gave 11 examples of what anti-Semitism is, just so you know. Like, how do I know if I'm being anti-Semitic? Well, here are 11 examples. Of those 11 examples, and we did the math, 2/3 are criticism of Israel, the state of Israel, the nation, with the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi. Criticism of Israel in 2/3 of the examples that the IHRA gave, that's anti-Semitism, including, here we go, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Oh, in other words, if you think what's happening in Gaza is genocide, well, Nazis committed genocide. Now the state of Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, meaning they're trying to eliminate people on the basis of their blood. You are an anti-Semite. Oh, okay. You're an anti-Semite if you think that. It also tells us that the suggestion that Jews killed Jesus is, quote, classic anti-Semitism. Classic anti-Semitism. So there goes the New Testament. The whole New Testament is anti-Semitic too. Read the Gospels and see if they fall under that definition. They do. Why does this matter? Well, because about 40 U.S. states and the District of Columbia and our biggest cities, Miami, Los Angeles, have adopted this. This is their standard that they voted on and adopted. It's in the law. This standard. The one that tells you that criticism of the secular state of Israel or portions of the New Testament are, quote, anti-Semitism. The government of almost 40 states in the United States, I think 39 states, 40 countries around the world, but not just countries, NGOs, sports teams, the British Soccer League, Chelsea United. All of them have adopted this standard. Now, why would a sports team adopt this? Well, who knows why? Think about it for a minute. Why? Why would you declare something illegal? Oh, because you want to punish people who violate it. That's why. This happened today. Ukraine, that beacon of democracy and freedom that we've sent hundreds of billions of dollars to, just made it law today that anti-Semitism, in other words, criticism of Israel, is a felony punishable by up to 8 years in prison. 8 years in prison. How could a rational person understand that? Well, a rational person could not understand that. Why would a citizen of one country be sent to prison for criticizing the leadership of another country, a country not his own? Why would a citizen of one country be sent to prison for having opinions about historical events that he did not participate in and that were almost a century ago? Does that make any sense? No, except in religious terms. Those are blasphemy laws, same as the old blasphemy laws. And for all the talk of how the mullahs are bad, the mullahs are bad. Well, the mullahs probably are bad. I'm not defending the mullahs, but why are we told the mullahs are bad? The mullahs are bad because they're religious extremists. They have blasphemy laws. They'll hurt you if you say certain things. Okay. Well, that looks a lot like what we're seeing here. Almost 40 states. Now, it's interesting. The president has been, all of a sudden, it makes sense. This may be the Rosetta Stone that helps us interpret events we're watching now that are very confusing. And those would include the president advocating for re-upping FISA. Now, FISA, without getting too boring about it, is the law, which has to be voted on periodically by Congress, that allows the U.S. government to spy on Americans, to spy on them. Now, the whole point of it is supposed to be to spy on foreigners who are threatening us, but the nature of the technology being what it is, there are cases where we pick up communications from Americans, and in order to make that legal, we need this thing called FISA. Now, what's interesting is that the president himself was a victim of the misuse of these laws in his first term. They were used against him in what became a kind of bureaucratic attempted coup against him that we call Russiagate. And so the president was personally very sensitive on this question. He'd been the victim of the misuse of these laws. And so he said many times, I'm not for that. I don't think Americans should be spied on by their own government. I don't think you pay your taxes, today's tax day, by the way, in order to be spied on by your government when you've done nothing wrong. But we are, everyone knows that, and this allows it to be legal. All of a sudden, the president is advocating for this new law. He wants the Congress to allow the U.S. government to spy on Americans. Why could that possibly be? Well, there are a couple of clues. One comes from the documents unearthed and made public, God bless him, by Ed Snowden some years ago that showed that NSA, the National Security Agency, the largest of all of our spy agencies, turned over raw data to, can you guess? Oh, the Israeli government that included private information about Americans. So they sweep up all this information, the comms, the communications of American citizens, and they just turn it all over without taking private information about Americans, our citizens, is turned over to a foreign government and its intel service to be used God knows how. That's one. Two is a very revealing moment in the Congress 2.5 years ago with a congressman from Ohio called Mike Turner, who at the time was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And he was arguing, as chairman of the House Intel Committee always do, for more spying on Americans. So the House and Senate Intel Committees are supposed to provide oversight of the intelligence agencies because you don't really know what they're doing. You don't know what their budget is. The whole thing is secret. You can't know. So your representatives on these committees oversee just to make sure that they're not violating the U.S. Constitution or your human rights given to you by God and protected by the U.S. government. That's the whole point. But for my lifetime, those committees have worked in concert with the intel agencies to violate the civil rights of Americans. And they've almost always been run by some of the most dishonest and personally screwed up people in the entire Congress. So maybe it's not always true, but certainly in the case of Mike Turner, it is true. the guy publicly accused of corruption with a chaotic personal life, that guy winds up as the chairman of an intel committee. I wonder why. Someone who's vulnerable to control winds up in charge of oversight of the intel agencies. Okay, that's definitely Mike Turner. So anyway, Mike Turner's running this, and he's making the case to about 200 staffers on the Hill. And he said, we got to do this. We got to do this. And he has a bunch of slides behind him. And one of the slides he puts up shows people protesting the murder of civilians by the Israeli government in Gaza. Those Gaza protests. And he says, we need this because these people are clearly taking orders from Hamas. These are like college kids who were mad about babies being murdered by the IDF. But because Mike Turner, and a lot of people like Mike Turner, because look at them and say, you've got foreign connections. You can't have come to this conclusion on your own. You didn't just choose apostasy. You clearly were corrupted by some outside force, some foreign power. We get to spy on you. He made that case in the Congress. So how does this connect to blasphemy laws as outlined and adopted by almost 40 states by IHRA? Really simple. If having these, quote, perceptions is a crime, then that gives the U.S. government pretext to spy on you and then punish you. Another way of thinking about it is almost no human action or now perception, thought crime, is ever encoded by any legislative body without an eye toward punishing people who violate it. Why would you vote on it if you didn't intend to punish people who go against the standard you set? Well, you wouldn't. And so the point is, this new civic religion is very much the opposite of the old civic religion in that it doesn't protect civil rights, human inherent rights. It is the enemy of those rights. It is the enemy of universalism, the belief that all of us were created by God and have equal moral worth. It is the enemy of that. And it's the enemy of the understanding of people that led to the Bill of Rights, which is we have these rights given to us by God. It does not believe that, and you know that because its first command is that you shut up, and not just shut up, but change your, quote, perceptions, change the thoughts in your head, change your feelings, your perceptions, your conclusions. You must change those. It is a totalitarian worldview. It is a totalitarian worldview in that it seeks to control the totality of a person, not just your actions. You can't punch someone in the face because you don't like his ethnicity. Fair. Everyone's for upholding that law. You can't have a certain perception of another person. If there's a better definition of a totalitarian aim, hard to think of what it might be. So that's our new religion. That's where Israelism gets us.
So there you have it. That was Tucker Carlson bringing light to this new law that's been passed out that apparently a lot of Americans do not even know about. They don't know that there's been a change made to what the definition of anti-Semitic means. So if you as a Christian person, acknowledge the fact that in the Bible, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and those folks took part in the killing of Jesus Christ, then that could potentially affect you. Now, what I see as a Christian man is that this may cause a lot of backlash for people in the church who's just preaching the truth. And for a lot of people who may not even know that this is a law, especially if you're online or social media and you are in your own way acknowledging the events of the Bible, you may be attracting attention to yourself. So I thought this story was a little important because my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. They don't know. If you don't know because you haven't been following this, because it's not on the television, it's not being broadcast in major media, what is being done to potentially curtail certain rights that people perceive that they have with regards to free speech and freedom of religion and things of that nature, then you could be getting yourself jammed up. And, I don't typically do a lot of things on anti-Semitism and things like that. That's not really a topic I cover that much. I tend to steer clear of it, but I do think a lot of people can end up being victims of this. simply for saying their opinion on a war, or their opinion on a particular government. And that opinion could be something that's used against them in a court of law to potentially imprison them. And what Tucker has brought to light is that, Ukraine has now made it punishable up to 8 years in prison if somebody criticizes a particular government. That's having an opinion on how a government is being run in what's supposed to be considered a democratic country could potentially get you in trouble. So I don't say this to encourage anyone to be anti-Semitic. I'm saying this to encourage people to be cautious as to what they say and what they do, and to understand that what they say and do may come with consequences that they weren't even aware of. So, I encourage people to be informed, to look this stuff up, to see if your state is one of the states that's affected by this definition, this tweak to the law, and also to make sure that you keep these things in consideration as you go about your daily life, whether that's posting, whether that's expressing yourself, and just to know that these things comes with consequences. And for a lot of us, we're absent-minded, and we may not even think that by sharing our opinion on something, it could be used against us. And I think he's laid out a case where he's explaining that, something you may say with no malice or no intention, and it can be misconstrued to be one thing, and now they're building a case to make it illegal. There are students who participated in certain protests against things that took place, and they got deported. So there's real consequences related to these things. And this is for all the people out there. This is one of those, be mindful and be aware moments. So I thought it'd be important to share that. Hopefully you guys got something out of this tidbit, and that it's informed you to make wise decisions on your day-to-day interactions online or elsewhere. All right, that's it for me, Mr. B. Thank you guys for joining me. Definitely stay connected. Definitely check out Tucker Carlson's network television, YouTube, where he originally released this information. It came across my feed, and I was like, yeah, this could be useful information for my audience and others. So let me share it, and so I'm doing that. So that being said, guys, God bless you until we speak again.